Okay. Good evening. My name is Bill Horns. I'm calling to order this September 9th meeting of the Transportation and Transit Commission of the City of Fitchburg. The first item is roll call and determination of quorum, but I'd like to, one of our new members is Charity Ellison, and I was going to ask Charity if you are on Zoom now. She's not here yet. Okay, let's go through the others. Gabriella Gerhardt.
Here.
Mike Gronetsky, I believe, said he would not be here. I'm Bill Horns, I'm here. Troy. Here. Strauss. Not present. And Rich Tate.
Here.
Well, we have a quorum. Apparently,
the microphone isn't on. Is it?
Apparently three. The light's not on. Apparently, three people are not here yet, but we can proceed. And when Shirley gets here, I'll ask her to introduce herself. Are there any public appearances for non-agenda items? Seeing none, I would like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda for this week.
So moved.
Month.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion about the agenda or concerns? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as have been published from last time?
Move to approve minutes.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the
I had
minutes?
one small point. There's a typo for item, I believe it's 5B, 5A.
Okay.
Says Gerhardt asked that we include the roundabout, and the next word is. I think it should be as the staff recommended option.
Oh, as instead of is.
Yes.
All right, so noted. Are there other comments on the minutes from last time? Seeing none, all in favor of approving those minutes indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. We have approved minutes. The next item, report from the department. Andrew, I think we're going to look at you.
Hey, everybody. Good evening. Yeah, so a few things. Certainly, we're making good progress. Making good progress on Fish Hatchery Road. We're going to be switching over to the south side of the intersection of Mckee tomorrow, as well as Caddis. And so we'll be moving on to the north section, kind of northwest corner of Mckee and Fish, starting next week. So that'll be exciting. And then West Lacey Road reconstruction. So Manatee Council, we have some 60% plans updated. And those will probably be coming to us next month for a TPP or Transportation Project Plat submittal. So look forward to that. And then South Saline, we met today for our 8th small group meeting. And, we made some good progress talking about intersections, and kind of intersection control pros and cons, and so that's great. And so we'll have a meeting on September 29th, a full public meeting to kind of check in with folks with a kind of initial draft of the corridor and kind of circle back to some of the comments that were made at the first public meeting in February. So those are kind of big highlights. Just a quick note, we do have the Cap City closure this weekend, as well as the Ironman. So in addition to, and McCoy closure over the weekend. So a lot of stuff going on in East Fitchburg in terms of kind of disruptions to normal traffic. So just want to get everybody a heads up for that.
Are you done?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, are there any other comments or discussion about that? Gabriella.
Yeah, one question for you, Andrew. I know, this commission and some of the other ones approved the roundabout at approved the roundabout design for Lacey and Seminole intersection, but the council declined to clarify the roundabout versus other intersection control, with the anticipation that there might be another amendment to kind of clarify that for the Kale Engineering Design Team. Is that something that we might see in the near future? Do you think, I just don't know if there's a timeliness on that in terms of Kale Engineering needing to start working on that design.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been working on an ordinance change, basically, that would take effect when we construct the roadway. But, yeah, I mean, by and large, we didn't hear any new feedback from the public meeting that we had. And so, I think we're sticking with the staff recommendation of a roundabout, but we'll bring that back to council in September for referral, so that we'll kind of update that as an ordinance change.
Great, thanks.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, where do we stand on the prioritization of the bike and pedestrian crossing locations? We talked about that last time. DJ Aarons was here to talk about it. You sent out the little form or sheet, but is it sort of just dropped off the radar? Is that still in the works? Has it been decided? Is there anything we need to do?
Right, that's a great question. So I know that Gabriella brought it up to council, and I think the idea was generally to like kind of broadening it, giving council a chance to weigh in. I haven't heard anything on that, so I think we can move forward. But I did want to circle back with Gabriella and with you guys just to make sure we're okay with that.
Yeah, it might be worthwhile to, maybe I'll plan at the following meeting next week to include it specifically as part of my transportation transit update, so that there's like a moment for everyone to take a look and consider. So maybe I'll go ahead and do that next week so that we make sure that everyone has a chance to take a look at it and give some feedback.
All right. Before we go any farther, I want to note that we've been joined by Jason Strauss and Charity Ellison. And Charity, since you're a new member here, I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and to say welcome to you to the commission. I don't hear Charity. I saw her.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My audio that I'm receiving is really bad. There's a lot of echo.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Well, anyway, so I'm glad to be here. Sorry, I had to miss the last meeting. I was out of town. I'm probably going to be fairly quiet for the first meeting, just as I, try to learn the issues and some of the, the more technical aspects of what it is we're doing here. I am currently retired, and I have a background, a fairly extensive background, actually, in policy work. I worked for Dane County for 12 years, and part of that time I spent as the legislative lobbyist for the county. So it was there that I had some exposure to transportation issues because of the fact that I needed to work on those issues both at the state and federal level. The primary reason that I joined, I think, is just because I'm a citizen of Fitchburg, and so I wanted to be able to be a participant in local government as a way of just contributing to the community here. So good to be here. Good to hope that I can meet all of you in person in the near future.
All right, thank you, and again, welcome to the commission. Look forward to working with you. Before we go to the next item, I just wanted to ask, I see some names up here. Do we have public appearance requests for these people? Do any of these named people up here, Jill, Jennifer, Mike, or Justin, have any of them requested to speak on items?
They are here from Metro. I'm not exactly sure who this number is. That's 692 number. I don't know who that is. But we have people from Metro to item number 7.
So they want to speak, or they'll be recognized by you, Andrew, during the presentation on transit update?
Yeah, exactly. So, yep, Justin, the general manager, Mike, who's leading the network redesign, Jennifer, the finance director, are all going to be kind of talking on their individual points, just as we hit the transit update section of the meeting.
Okay.
Thanks, guys, for being here.
So that's Justin and this gentleman, and but Jennifer and Jill, are they also speaking in that section?
Jill from our senior center is here. She's definitely interested in kind of this topic and kind of how we transport seniors around. I don't know if she'll be talking tonight. I think she just wants to sit in.
Okay, so she's just sitting in. All right, thank you. So let's go ahead. Item 7A is transit update, and Andrew, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. So I think I briefly introduce folks here, but if they want to start to turn their cameras on, and feel free. Yeah, I'm honored to have lots of great folks that we work with Metro here tonight to answer your questions. I'll kind of just open it up to them. I think our main agenda items here tonight would be, we're really looking, there's a lot of questions that came up of kind of the network update and some of this updated partner agreement, and Metro's really here to talk about that. And then after kind of they present briefly on those updates and kind of where we're at with that, and you guys can answer or ask questions, then we'll switch over to kind of my topics, which would be talking about operating assistance, so that would be direct state aid directly from WSDOT, and some microtransit concepts kind of packaged together. I can also talk briefly about kind of 4 main decisions that we'll be talking about over the next couple of months. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to Metro staff, and in any order, feel free, guys, go for it. Thanks.
I'll kick us off. So I'm Justin Stuenberg. I'm general manager at Metro. Thank you all for having us tonight. Thanks for Andrew for your continued coordination. So we've got a couple topics that Andrew asked us to talk about. I'll kick off with starting with the partnership agreements. And then Jennifer Schiller is our finance manager. She'll assist me, and then Mike Chekvala will talk about the network redesign. So I guess first, would it be helpful if I shared a presentation or just talk verbally? I'm not sure what your capabilities are there.
Sure, yeah. Try to screen share and see if you can.
Okay. Sorry, I'm battling with multiple screens here. Okay. So for those of you who aren't aware, we have, and it looks like I'm on the wrong screen now. So let me change my screen share. Sorry about that. There we go. So for those of you who aren't aware, Fitchburg and actually 7 other entities around the Madison metropolitan region have contracts with Metro to provide service. And to date, that contract has been a pretty simple contract where we just take our total our total expense and total revenue and divide that out by the hours that are expended within each jurisdiction. And that generally works out as a fair distribution of funds. The problem is that it can vary quite a bit from one year to the next, and sometimes with very little notice. And so that's obviously a problem for you, and it's a problem for all the other partners. And so we set out on a path to trying to figure out a way to rectify some of this so that you can have a little bit more consistency from year to year. There's some issues around your payments being subject to the operating levy limit. Partners, what one partner does influences all the other partners, which is another problem why some of these costs fluctuate. So if one partner decides to decrease service, that means that every other partner now has a larger share of that pie, and so their costs go up. And so we're trying to find ways to alleviate those issues. And then finally, there's an issue around the assets. So, we in Madison have to make a substantial investment, buying a bus, hiring staff, to provide service. Those buses are $500,000 and have a lifespan of 12 to 15 years. And so they outlive the term of our agreement, which any of our partners right now can just exit the agreement with relatively little notice. And that obviously would impact Madison specifically because we'd have an asset now that we've paid for but don't have a use for. But it would also affect all the other partners because now, again, on the operating side, they now have you would all have a larger share of the remaining pie if one of the partners chose to exit. So with that in mind, we started meeting in January with many of the mayors and senior officials and other organizations to look at a way that we could make these contracts more resilient so that we could structure them in a way that can address some of these challenges that we've identified. Through that process, we've developed a proposal, done some cost projections around the implications of that proposal, met as a large group with all of the partners, as well as individually with each of the partners to review those numbers. And to date, we feel like we've got a pretty strong level of support, at least at the staff level, at all the municipal partners. So that's Fitchburg, Verona, Sun Prairie, Middleton. And so we're starting the process now of putting pen to paper and actually getting a draft of that together. But what it would look like, in many ways, it's not that dissimilar from our current arrangement, where we take actual costs and we divvy them up based on actual service, so that we can all be assured that nobody is subsidizing each other. Madison's not subsidizing Fitchburg, and Fitchburg's not subsidizing Madison. But we're doing it in a slightly different way that allows us to absorb some of these year-to-year fluctuations in cost and give everyone more stability in their budgeting. And so how we're proposing to do this is to create an escrow or contingency fund. We're still debating on the actual terminology, but populating that fund with the federal rescue funds that we've received through the three different federal bills that have passed. And for those of you who aren't aware, about $70 million of those rescue funds between the three bills did come directly to Metro for our use, primarily to replace lost fare revenue, but also address increased costs and other things. So we would create this escrow fund for each partner. Then partners would essentially just set their budgets for the next 5+ years, just assuming their current rate plus 3% inflation. And so those contributions would just go directly into the escrow account. And then we would bill actual costs from the actual escrow account. Right now, our projections have that escrow account starting out at around 100% of your annual budget, drawing down to something close to 25% of your annual budget, and then stabilizing there from that point forward. Right now we are experiencing reduced fare revenues right now because of COVID, and so costs right now are elevated, and so we will be drawing down, and so Fitchburg will be paying less than the actual cost of service for the next several years. But then based on our projections, we do expect that to reach equilibrium. And then there would be this escrow fund in place to absorb year-to-year fluctuations. But the one other wrinkle here is that this escrow fund would not be refundable. So if a partner decides to leave the system, they would still have the ability to do that. Because we talked around, setting a 10 or 15-year contract term. But, I think any of our elected leaders, in any of the cities are concerned about tying the hands of future administrations and not allowing them to leave an agreement. as well as, I don't think any of us want to be in a position of, suing each other for breach of contract. So what we've proposed is that partners can still leave if they need to for one reason or another, but the remaining funds in that escrow account that again were populated by federal transit money, not by local money, that those funds would then be redistributed to all the other partners to cover their increased cost of that partner leaving. And so it again allows a mechanism for us to control costs in the event that one partner does decide to leave, and not have that impact everyone else. So that is the proposal in a nutshell. This is kind of a visual representation of that, where again, we're putting rescue funds in to populate this escrow. You budget an amount to put into the escrow every year, and then we bill against the escrow of actual costs every year. And then again, if you leave the system or any other partner leaves the system, then those funds are redistributed to all the other partners. So there's obviously a lot more detail that we could get into, but in the interest of time, we wanted to keep this fairly short and to the point. But we are working on a draft of a contract right now. Hopefully we'll have that distributed sometime later this month to staff. Give you all a few months to do any reviews and comments on that draft, hopefully with a finalized draft by the end of the year, to then start working through each of the partners' formal approval processes in early next year. So each of these contracts would have to be approved by both Madison and the partner itself. So we've got a lot of approvals to work through, and it'll take a little bit of time for sure. So with that, like I said, I wanted to keep this relatively short, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have regarding this process.
Okay, we'll open it up for questions. I'll lead off with a quick one. This term contract and another term is partner agreement. Are those synonyms? Are those mean the same thing?
Yes, they are the same thing.
With that, are there other comments from commission members or questions from commission members?
Hi, this is Troy Klein. I'm interested, are you going to do any retrospective budgets for comparison when we do the analysis of how so we can compare basically how the present budgeting system works versus what it would have been if this was in effect?
So yeah, we've got some of those numbers. Part of the challenge with the existing contract system is that it's very fragile, right? So we can predict what we expect to happen, but that may go one way or the other depending on the conditions on the ground at the time. The nice thing about this escrow is that it allows us to absorb those fluctuations, and so we can have a little bit more stability. But certainly we can compare somewhat. We don't actually expect you all to change the total amount of money that you spend. What we hope to do is to increase some of the certainty around when you spend it and exactly how much.
Gabriella.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Justin. I'm really happy to, I think everyone knows here that I've been sitting in on a lot of the partner meetings, so I've been listening to this process for a while, but it's really nice to get a summary of where it stands, something that we can share with this committee and also with other committees and the council. I guess I just wanted to clarify, last year the talk was that there was going to be a very significant increase in cost due to these investments. So because of this rescue funding and this escrow account, I just want to clarify that you're anticipating that we're able to contribute the same amount in 2022 as we did this year, and then every year beyond that, that amount plus a 3%, increase, and that potentially is looking like that will be what a consistent 3% increase going forward, and there's not going to be a sudden jump because of this rescue funding in the escrow is kind of cushioning that blow that we were anticipating last year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. One clarification that we do expect it to be 3% jump in 2022 and each year subsequently. But I will say one caveat is that what we're talking about here is cost per hour, so the cost per amount of service. Fitchburg is in the unique position with the town of Madison annexation that the hours in Fitchburg will go up later at the end of late next year and into 2023. But again, your cost will go up more than just 3% because of that town annexation. But the cost per hour will be that steady with inflationary growth.
All right, that's really helpful. And just for reference for the committee, our budget in 2021 for Madison Metro was $502,655. And with a 3% increase in 2022, it would be $517,735, presumably with some sort of premium due to the annexation of the town of Madison starting in October of 2022. So I assume that the mayor and the finance department are working on what that number looks like, but just for reference.
Okay.
And just a quick note on that. So basically, there was kind of so there's already an increase in 2021 because of some of the I guess issues with COVID and increased capitalization. So although we're paying 502, our budget, as reported, was at 580, and so then it's 30% on top of that, plus the hours that we're going to get from the town of Madison. So right now, our 2022 operating budget figure is about $620,000. Now, we can still talk through what our 2021 base should be, if that's 502 or 580. We're still kind of working through that, but so far, just as a preliminary estimate, we're at basically 620,000.
Okay. Are there questions or comments from commission members? Troy?
Yeah, one of the problems we had in the past was when service started in the middle of the budget year, there'd be kind of this balloon problem. Is that balloon problem mitigated for routes that start not on the beginning, but any time during the year?
So I don't think I understood the question, Andrew. And you said the balloon problem, is that what you said?
Well, if you start a route in February, then there's, the full cost is not really reflected until the next year.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
this, is the budgeting going to be by month then, or so it's not all at once? The charges made, the actual charges are going to be each month, so to speak, instead of adjusted once a year?
Yeah, so we would set the hourly rate at the for each year based on the 3% inflation schedule, and then we have a certain number of hours that we have planned for Fitchburg and for all the other partners to provide, and so we would bill based on that, and we'd bill quarterly based on the number of hours. Certainly if you plan to add a route or change a route, we would plan ahead for that. That's something that we can't just flip a switch on. And so we would most likely build that into your calculations for the year in advance. Sorry if that answers your question.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Okay. I saw Jason disappeared. Charity, did you have any question? I guess not. I had another question on the comment schedule that you showed. That it's a pretty tight schedule. I'm not clear what role this commission should play in commenting, or when the council would be expecting something from us to advise them about that. So I'd just appreciate maybe, Gabriella, you could comment on that. And from other commissioners, what should be our role of this commission in commenting on a proposal like this, which is really it's a funding proposal, not a transportation design proposal. But so with that, Gabriella, could you just comment briefly on our role relative to the council and?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I might have Andrew jump in and help me with this because there's some outstanding elements of this. But what I'm hoping to do is present this. I'm hoping to send out information in advance to the council, but at our upcoming meeting next week, present an abbreviated form of this and let them know that they should take a look at this meeting and get some information about this. I'm going to ask the council president if we can have a committee of the whole discussion about this so that we can have a more extensive discussion before any particular proposal, especially as the contract is being developed in October and November. If the council has input, I'd like for that discussion to be had amongst staff so that, you know, with the staff's input so that we can have some more concrete information. But my assumption would be that we'd have a proposal that would come forward. It would be referred to Transportation and Transit, probably Public Works, Finance,
Okay.
and then it would eventually make it way back to council. But there's that contract, this partner contract, which I think by what Justin said it would look like, we're looking at that in December with approval maybe at the beginning of 2022. But then there's also an intersecting issue of the network design study with the different, potentially changing the routes to some extent in Fitchburg, which I think is a kind of a separate issue that would require a separate series of votes. Is that, Andrew, can you comment on that? Or if someone in Metro wants to jump in?
Yeah, and honestly, we probably have 4 discrete decisions to make. There's also a question of direct state funding, as well as any, you know, if there are changes or significant changes to the route network, how we might want to complement with other service like a rideshare. And so I think those are really the 4 primary decisions that it would be nice to get in front of the committee as a whole to address kind of all at once. Because, you know, some of them can be kind of done in isolation and some of them need to be done before December.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be helpful to kind of get the whole universe together.
Okay, so could you just restate what those 4 decisions are again?
Yeah, sure. So the 4 decisions as I kind of see them is there's a direct operating assistance from WSDOT. So currently we get our operating assistance from Metro Transit through their Tier 1 or Tier A2, I think, funding from the state and federal government. And so that basically, if we wanted to get ours directly from WSDOT, we could potentially save $50,000 to $100,000 a year. The deadline for that is December 15th to apply. And so we would need to know basically by November if you know, get some staff direction to prepare the grant materials. The second decision is any requested route changes from Metro Transit through the network design process. I know that Mike's going to be talking about that in a little bit, just kind of what their schedule is, but I believe, you know, the 2 kind of competing or, you know, main paradigms are presented right now with the network and the ridership, the coverage and the ridership kind of networks. I believe that they're going to be collecting data and then, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at maybe a recommended network by December. Does that sound right?
Yes, we're looking for feedback on kind of the 2 alternatives, the ridership versus coverage, and where we should be in that spectrum in the short term, and then we'll be working on the design of the network the rest of this year, hopefully with a recommendation early in 22.
Okay, sorry. Yep, early in 22. So I think there's a couple chances. There's kind of this open call that we can weigh in. You know, after Mike kind of presents, we can talk through that. But then even after that, there's going to be kind of a fine tuning of the network, and that's going to be another opportunity early in 2022. That's the second decision. And then, you know, so really it's kind of a two-parter right now, and then later on to really negotiate what those final network changes are going to be. The third decision is to, you know, what Justin's talking about, modify and accept the Metro partner agreement that starts now and carries through Q1 of 2022. And then there's a fourth decision of, you know, potentially procuring, you know, there has been talk of doing our own service. Getting direct state aid would open up some options to get that, any complimentary service, basically 50% off, you know, through operating charges. So it basically, through all these changes, there could be an opportunity to get a new service, or, you know, in some ways bring back a similar service like the rideshare. And so that would be a fourth decision that we wouldn't need to, you know, procure until later next year, but we would potentially be using any savings from, as I mentioned before, us saving $50,000 to $100,000 a year. We could potentially put that towards this complimentary service. So that's kind of the four decisions. I'm happy to send you those, but that's kind of how I itemized it. I'm happy to.
Yeah, it would help me if you could summarize those in writing, and we don't have to go through them anymore right now, but if we could have those for reference.
Sure. But yeah, sorry to run away with that. Feel free to go back to Metro if you have any more questions.
Okay, I think we want to get on with the redesign study here, but Gabriella, did you have another comment?
Yeah. I was just wondering what was next for this discussion. Are we going to talk about the network redesign? Or are you going to talk about microtransit, or is that, okay, great.
So I'll let Mike take the lead on the network redesign.
Yep, I'm gonna try to share screens here. Okay, I'm assuming you can see that. If not, let me know. So the transit network redesign, the basic goal of the redesign is to design a route system that will better meet the needs of the Madison area residents and businesses. So the Madison area includes Fitchburg and Middleton and Sun Prairie, Verona, and the other our partners that are part of the system. We have a website, mymetrobus.com/redesign. So I encourage anybody to go there and find some more of this information. This is going to be a higher level summary. Try to keep it relatively brief. So the key project assumptions are that this is a comprehensive redesign. We're assuming that the existing routes and schedules don't exist. So it's really a ground up, empty sheet of paper type of a plan in order to really just redesign it from the ground up. We're assuming the total pre-pandemic service hours will be in place after the redesign. So we've cut service back since the pandemic, and we're still lower than where we were, but we're assuming that those service hours will come back. That's important, that we're not planning on adding service, we're not planning on reducing service from that level. So it's essentially a reallocation of the service hours that we had prior to the pandemic. We're assuming that bus rapid transit, BRT, will be in place. And we're also making the assumption that local routes will not use the BRT infrastructure. So the major catalysts for this project are the bus rapid transit system going in and us not wanting to duplicate BRT, but instead complement it and make the transfers and that kind of thing for BRT. You know, by the time you touch the routes that are on the BRT corridors, that's half the service. You're redesigning half of the service already. So we're just doing a ground up redesign. Another factor is just some of the requests for faster service and service in areas that haven't had full all-day service over the years. Various requests that people have sent to Metro trying to address some of those concerns. And then the final catalyst has been the pandemic. So again, because we've reduced service, we have an opportunity to put it back more in the way that we'd like to see it go in, as opposed to just putting back what was there. We're sort of treating the network that was reduced. We see us recovering from the pandemic service levels with the redesign. So when we build back up, we're building up with the redesigned transit system. Project goals are to simplify service so that's easier for people to use, reduce travel times, increase ridership, reduce vehicle miles traveled, improve service for underserved and disadvantaged communities, and complement the BRT system. So a little bit about the existing transit network. The transfer point system was implemented in 1998. It's a pulse system with time transfers. It has a commuter overlay network during peak periods in order to kind of bypass the transfer points and provide more capacities for people traveling into the central Madison downtown UW area. Service was reduced significantly in early 2020 for the pandemic. Some of the service is funded by partner agencies, so that's the larger view of this redesign has to keep that in mind. That the transit network it crosses borders and it's funded in different ways. So again, we had about 450,000 annual service hours pre-pandemic. So a bus service hour is a bus in service for 1 hour. So that's fundamentally the unit of measurement that we have. We want to keep that number essentially constant. We're not planning on adding or subtracting to that number. So this was a pre-COVID transit network. So this is essentially what we're redesigning, not only where the routes go, but also how often they run. So this was the pre-pandemic network. A lot of overlapping routes. It's very complicated. We had a lot of different routes that operated during different times of the day. Different routes operate on different days of the week. Some routes go one way and some routes go a different way. Generally, no routes run every 15 minutes or better throughout the day. So, we'd like to kind of simplify this, make it faster, simpler, and easier for people to use. On top of all this is the bus rapid transit system. You may have heard me talk about BRT before, but just a quick review. BRT is a route with a more direct route with fewer stops, frequent all-day service, bus-only lanes, branded stations and buses, transit signal priority, and faster fare payment. So it's a combination of improvements along a single route that really reduces the travel times and makes that route operate much better and faster and more attractive service. Comparable strategies in other cities are like light rail, metro or subway or whatever. So it's kind of in that family of high capacity transit. This is a map of the bus rapid transit system. So the first line that we're implementing is the red line. It's the east-west line. The second BRT line that we will be implementing is the green line, which is the north-south line. We're not entirely sure what the corridor is going to be, but it will generally run from Fitchburg or the south side of Madison to the north side of Madison. When we implement the red line, we will be purchasing the buses for the green line and then this blue line that goes to Middleton at the same time. And as we implement the transit network redesign, we're implementing the service pattern for all three lines at the same time. So by 2024, when the red line is complete, we'll have a fully functional red line BRT system from the west to the east side of Madison. We'll have the green line BRT in place in terms of the buses operating on the route with the schedule and the frequent service every 15 minutes. But the green line will still be serving regular Madison Metro bus stops. It will not be serving the BRT stations, nor will it have other improvements like bus lanes and signal priority. Those improvements will come within the next 5 to 10 years or so. So this is a kind of a look of, this is a typical BRT running way and station. So you see the bus lanes in the middle. This is Mineral Point Road, platform and station in the median, and buses have doors on both sides. So this will be what the east-west corridor will look like by the end of 2024. Oops. Okay, so as we design the rest of the network, which is really what the transit network redesign is all about. It's sort of every route besides the red, green, and blue lines. We have this trade-off that we have to consider. Transit serves several goals It can kind of lean one way or the other. One direction that it can go, or one goal that it tries to fulfill, is the ridership goal. The basic goal of trying to serve more people, get more people on the bus, improve ridership. The way you generally do that is by concentrating transit service onto fewer routes with more frequent service, and ultimately increasing ridership because you're concentrating the service where more people live, work, and are willing to use it. And then the improved frequency makes that service more attractive. The other goal and the other direction that transit networks can go is the coverage goal. Coverage extends transit service to as many people as possible, regardless of frequency. So coverage is going to have more service in more places, but it will be lower quality service because the service will be lower frequency. The bus may come once or twice an hour as opposed to 2 or 4 times an hour, and it will take longer to make trips. So it will be less effective at increasing ridership, but it will put some semblance of service in front of more people. Here's a more of a graphical representation of that. So this is a ridership based concept. So this is your fictional city, and you have two main corridors here, a north-south corridor and east-west corridor. By concentrating the service onto the high ridership corridors with more people living along it and working along it, you're able to attract more ridership. And then the other concept is essentially just fanning the service out to more places around the city and getting lower frequency service on more routes to more people. The basic problem is that these are competing goals. With a fixed level of funding, whatever that level of funding is, we usually can't do both. We can do some mix and matching of the coverage and ridership goals, but that's primarily what we're trying to discuss today. And at this phase of the project is determining from a policy level where we should be on that coverage to ridership trade-off. So what goes into drawing the transit network alternatives? So we have the existing transit ridership that we know about that's today, but what about potential transit ridership that we're not able to serve? That's basically driven by residential and employment density. So for most trips, people are going from their home to somewhere, some destination. Many destinations are employment, but not all destinations are employment. The one good thing about employment is it's very easy for us to map and quantify. So to some degree, we're saying that the employment is the destination side, and the residential density is sort of the source side for transit trips. And where we get a lot of good all-day transit ridership is where we have both, a combination of both residential and employment density. So you can kind of see that in the downtown Madison area, and then also in some of the nodes around the system. So this is really what drives ridership and potential ridership. And then the other thing that we have to keep in mind is the roadway network. Buses drive on roads, and so we generally try to keep the routes relatively straight on arterial streets, possibly collector streets. But we do have to use the roads, and we can't drive on streets like cul-de-sacs and very local streets. We have barriers like freeways and other things that are all part of this. So that's kind of how we put the network together. Equity is a major concern for Metro and the city of Madison, as well as most of our most people involved in these projects. So we take into consideration equity. We can look at things like race, income, and car availability. We have a lot of relatively isolated neighborhoods around the system. And so one of our major goals in this project is to improve the access to the network and to destinations for people in these neighborhoods. So this is a schematic of the existing transit network. So this is drawn in a way that highlights the frequency, the midday frequency of the route. So you see not every route has its own color. Instead, the colors indicate how often it runs. The red lines run every 15 minutes or better. Essentially, we just have a little bit of 15-minute service, mainly around the UW campus. The dark blue lines are routes that run every 30 minutes. Again, weekdays, middays. And then the lighter blue lines that you can barely see on this map are routes that run once an hour. So you can see most of our system is service that runs every 30 minutes, twice an hour. We have a handful of corridors in the central area where those routes combine and create some semblance of more frequent service. But because it's very hard to make the schedules line up with each other, it's not really that way. It ends up being more of a collection of 30-minute routes. And then in the periphery of Madison, the midday service is almost exclusively hourly. We do have some service that runs more frequently than that, but basically in the periphery, it's an hourly system.
And Mike, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just point to where Fitchburg is, where we're sitting on this map?
Yeah. So Fitchburg is here. So here's the belt line is kind of here. So Fitchburg is down in this area on the south side. Yeah, this map isn't real great. Okay. So with all that in mind, we sat down with our transit consultants, Jarrett Walker and Associates. We've been privileged to have on this project. They're an internationally renowned transit planning firms. They've done this in lots of other cities. It's nice to have them come in because they can bring in that expertise, but also don't have bias towards what has maybe been designed or served in the past. So that helps us with that blank slate strategy. So here's the ridership map. Again, the goal here is to concentrate the service onto as few corridors as possible, but then that allows us to have more frequent service. So with the existing network, we had almost no 15-minute service. With the ridership network, we have lots of 15-minute service all over the place. That 15-minute service allows you to basically just wait at the bus stop for the next stop. The east-west BRT line is shown as Route A here. So from Westtown area through the University Avenue, through downtown and out East Washington Avenue. The north-south green line is the B line here. We gave all these routes we gave them most of them letters, just not confuse them with existing routes. So the B line is the north-south green line BRT. So it would start in Fitchburg at Fish Hatch and Hatchery Hill, basically somewhere in that area. Go up Fish Hatchery, Park Street, through the center of downtown Madison, East Wash, and then it would go up Sherman Avenue, and then basically out Northport Drive towards the end of the populated part of the corridor there. And then we have a handful of other 15-minute routes. We have the D line here serving Monroe Street, and then the C line, which goes out to the east side. And then the rest of the network is basically comprised of routes that run every 30 minutes. No routes would run hourly in the ridership network, but you can see there are a fair number of holes where there's no service at all. That would be mainly coverage service that has been moved to the higher ridership routes. And so we end up with a thinner network of much more frequent service. So now I'll move on to the coverage alternative. And so in the coverage alternative, you see less routes that run every 15 minutes. You see the east-west red line still designated as Route A here is basically the same. The north-south green line designated Route B here would be shorter, but it would still be there. It would run from the south transfer point at Badger and Park up through Madison to the north transfer point on Aberg Avenue. And then you see a network that's more densely has more routes on it to provide that coverage, but the cost of that is the routes run much less frequently. So we have a handful of routes that run every half hour, but then we have a smattering of less frequent hourly routes in the periphery that provide a lot of the coverage that existed with the existing map. So I'll just flip back and forth again between ridership and coverage. Ridership, fewer routes, but more frequent. Coverage, more routes, but less frequent. So I'll just zoom into Fitchburg for a little bit here. So again, Fitchburg is on the bottom of this map. One thing to notice that Fitchburg's service is closely intertwined with Madison's and the rest of the network. So, you know, we asked the consultant to basically ignore boundaries and draw the routes where they thought that they should go. So we do have a handful of routes that kind of cross the border here. On the ridership map, the north-south green line BRT line would continue down Fish Hatchery Road to Hatchery Hill or possibly McKee. And then we'd have the E line that would come down through Allied Drive and then out McKee. We would like to get service to this area on the western part of McKee, west of Verona Road. This area has been lacking service and it's been needing it for quite some time. So, you know, the key takeaway here is that a lot of the service that was existing on Route 40 here around Fish Hatchery Road basically all gets consolidated to Fish Hatch. And then so people would have to walk out to Fish Hatch from these neighborhoods. But then once they got there, they would get service every 15 minutes, which would be much more frequent than they're used to. So here's the coverage map in Fitchburg. This red dotted line is the approximate Madison-Fitchburg boundary. I kind of smoothed it out a little bit so it's easier to see. But again, you see more more routes with less frequent service. You have the hourly Route 96 coming through here, and then more 30-minute service that goes around the Fish Hatchery corridor and fills in more of the areas around Fish Hatch rather than just sticking to Fish Hatchery.
Mike, am I correct in seeing that in neither one of those, is there a route that comes out to City Hall here?
Correct. Yeah, we so the basic sandbox that we gave to our transit planners is that we're reorganizing the existing service. So if they couldn't get service, so we're not adding new service. We're really just rearranging the service. Now we could rearrange some of this and push service down Fish Hatch to the downtown City Hall area. Because most of the service is pretty thin, it would be difficult to do that, but it could be possible by making some of this service less frequent. If that's a priority, that is something that we could look at. For example, we did push service a little farther out onto to the west side and West Madison here. I should also point out that these maps are still fairly they're very preliminary. We're still just trying to give people an idea of what a coverage map looks like and what a ridership map looks like. And then once we get kind of an idea of where we should go in that coverage ridership spectrum, then we'll look at more detail, look at the actual route structure in more detail.
But I'm sorry, I have a question. Do you have any analysis on how the coverage model versus the frequency model actually affects the choice of riders to use mass transit? Do you have any information?
I do have some on that, and yeah, we do have. There's a lot of documentation on the website, but I'll get into it at a high level view. Yeah, just give me a second. So I think this is kind of where we're going with that. If it isn't, let me know. But so the key outcomes. So one thing we look at is a concept called access. In other words, if you start at one point, how far can you get in a reasonable amount of time? Reasonable amount of time is usually 45 minutes, but it's not really so much how far can you get, but what can you access? How many jobs can you access? Which again is kind of a placeholder for destinations. So ridership more than doubles how many jobs the average Madison resident actually should be I think it's the system. Actually, no, I think this was just looked at in Madison. average Madison, but we can look at, we can look at it in Fitchburg as well. How many jobs the average Madison resident can get to in 45 minutes. But the people within walk distance of a bus stop would be reduced from about 80% to 67%. So fewer people have access to the service, but on average, people can get farther and access more things because of the frequent service. And again, most of this reduction in people that have walk access to bus service, these are more often going to be people who live in lower density areas. And so where the service gets concentrated is the people that are more likely to use the bus because they live in denser neighborhoods and have lower incomes. So the coverage model slightly increases the number of people within walk distance of a bus stop. The existing number is 79%, so that goes up to 81%. And it also increases the number of jobs the average Madison resident can get to, but not nearly as much as the ridership. So even in coverage, just by rearranging the pieces, we're able to kind of improve both metrics. We have a few more people that can access the bus system in any form at all, but also on average, more people can average more destinations. But we're not nearly as effective at that access gain with the coverage model.
Those numbers are based on your draft?
These draft maps, yeah. Which again are very draft.
Those aren't theoretical numbers they're based on, but they're not final numbers. They're based on a draft.
Correct. They're based on those draft maps. Yep.
And if I could ask one other thing, is it possible when as you're doing this, to generate numbers like that for Fitchburg?
Yes, we can.
So we can see what happens
here. We can ask
here?
our consultant to do that. We have some documentation on our website too. We have these access maps. But yeah, we can do stuff like that.
Okay.
If that's let me know.
I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so I'd like to drill in a little bit and talk about Fitchburg. So as drawn, and again, these maps are they're illustrative. We wanted to look at real world design and not be so high level, but actually look at what it would actually look like in the Madison area for Metro. So again, these maps are very preliminary, but we do have to start somewhere. So as drawn, the ridership alternatives increases the amount of service hours in Fitchburg. The coverage alternative is about the same. I think there's a slight increase, but it's kind of in the margin of error. The final network design will work with Fitchburg's budget, and service increases in Fitchburg that benefit the network as a whole may not result in increased costs for Fitchburg. So I want to talk just for a second about why the ridership network increases costs for Fitchburg. It's really about bringing the north-south BRT line down Fish Hatchery Road. So not only are we increasing service on that corridor, but we're also essentially consolidating the service from these Madison neighborhoods onto Fish Hatchery Road. One outcome of that is it moves them essentially from the city of Madison area to the city of Fitchburg area. And so, that's essentially why the numbers come out that way. But I think we want to focus on the big picture at this point of what is the future of the north-south BRT line and where we want to be on that coverage ridership spectrum. Some other things I want to talk about. So key decisions in Fitchburg, should the new network lean towards coverage ridership or somewhere in between? It could be slightly different in Fitchburg. I think we would like to draw a network that's relatively similar overall. We don't want to be extreme coverage in Madison and then extreme ridership in Fitchburg. But that's not to say that the answer could be, somewhat different in Madison versus Fitchburg. And then should the BRT Green Line be extended into Fitchburg or end in Madison? That's not something we need to know right away, but we do want to start that conversation and start thinking about, do we want to think about extending the BRT Green Line down Fish Hatchery Road? Or do we want to start thinking about ending it at the southern end of Madison? That's a rhetorical question for now, but I think we do want to start the conversation on that. So next steps, again, decision on ridership coverage split that comes from policy bodies like this one, as well as the Madison Transportation Policy and Planning Board. We have a survey out now. We're trying to get as much input from the public, people who use the bus, as well as people who don't use the bus. Again, if you go to mymetrobus.com/redesign, there's a survey that you can take there. It just takes a minute or two. I would encourage you to do that and spread that if you have that. The final network design, again, once we have some direction on that coverage ridership split, we'll go into that pretty soon here. And then that'll go through the end of this year and into early 22. Implementation will be somewhere between 22 and 23. We think that maybe there can be some early implementation in 22, but by August 23, we'd kind of like to have the new network basically in place. And then the BRT infrastructure for the east-west BRT line will be complete towards the end of 2024. So by the end of 2024, we'll essentially swap out the buses and have BRT buses and bus lanes serving BRT stations, but the network won't substantially change because it will have been already implemented. Okay, so that's it. Happy to take any questions. Again, the website's on the bottom, survey there, if you can take that or spread it around. Any questions or comments? Be happy to take those.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Gabriella?
I just want to clarify with Andrew that, we just rebuilt a lot of Fish Hatchery Road. Can that new version of the road accommodate BRT? And then if it can, how far down Fish Hatchery could potentially a BRT line go?
Yes, so, sorry.
Yes, I think the newly redesigned BRT, the newly redesigned and rebuilt Fish Hatchery Road can accommodate BRT, either with side or preferably center running BRT with center platforms. We're able to basically make that work on existing streets in Madison, East Washington, and Mineral Point Road without doing any major reconstruction. So perhaps some construction around intersections and stations, but pretty minor. It's mainly confined to the station areas.
Got it. And then would it be able to extend past Mckee Road, or are you talking about like a Hatchery Hill, Cahill, Maine endpoint, or could it even go further south?
It could go further south. I think the key is BRT is fundamentally a service that operates every 15 minutes throughout most of the day. And so you really kind of need that solid density to provide that kind of ridership. We're showing it ending at the Hatchery Hill area. I think it could be extended to Mckee. Those two endpoints are not very far away from each other. I do think it's certainly possible to extend it farther south. I think being able to maintain the operational costs of the frequent service would be the major challenge. From infrastructure standpoint, yeah, it's definitely possible.
And just to add a quick note, so the dedicated bus lanes go down to Mckee and don't extend further south. So we wouldn't be able to use those further south, but I think there's also potentially options to cut frequency further south of that to basically run, at half frequency or double the frequency. So every 30 minutes, double the headway is half the frequency.
I would, I guess, isn't the time to get into debating details, but I just mentioned, I personally think it's very important to connect this where we're sitting right now, where a library is in the senior center and City Hall with Madison better. So I think some connection on that BRT out this far is, I would say, a very important thing. And I think if we could, as the discussion goes forward, I think it's going to be important to see what the trade-offs are in that. I know there are trade-offs. I know we might have to give up something else or it might cost more, but I think I would hope the city would look closely at pushing for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we can also do, there are other strategies that we can do, extend every other bus and stuff like that. There are some limitations on what we can do with that, but there are possibilities. It's good to know that that's of interest to the city.
All right, are there any other comments at this point from commissioners?
I don't have a comment. I have a question, though. I'm curious about, Mike, how you're planning on bringing back this. I mean, it sounds like there are a number of decisions that are as yet unmade. And at least for me, I mean, I'm seeing this obviously for the first time. So I'm wondering, what is the plan to bring this back through this standing committee so that we can look more at Fitchburg specific information and data that would be helpful, I think, in giving you useful feedback on how the design should best be targeted for the city of Fitchburg.
We can come back at pretty much whatever works for you. We'll come back on your invitation. I do think it would be helpful at some point if you could give us some direction on the coverage to ridership trade-off. We'll definitely also be working with you closely as we design the future network. So we'll be back, maybe in early 22 to talk about what we're recommending. And then that will ultimately be approved as any Fitchburg service change would be approved.
Gabriella, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just quickly, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming and laying all this out. This was really helpful to have on the public record. I'm definitely going to share this with the council so we can start a council discussion, since that's ultimately be where the decisions are made. But I think, to Bill's point about connecting our City Hall campus to the broader Fitchburg and the broader Madison area, I do think is a priority if it's something that we can work in. I also think that the fact that we are so intertwined with Madison at that border is a very important consideration in terms of how we design this network, because people behave in that area as if the Madison and Fitchburg neighborhoods are completely interconnected. That's how they are in reality. So I think that's an important consideration as we redesign. And then there's also that intersecting issue, which is a little bit separate, but about how to move people within our city, which we have not done well ever. And I know that Jill McComb is on the line, and it's a real particular issue for seniors in our area that don't have reliable transportation of their own, and that would like to access services that our senior center provides, which are pretty exceptional, but have a difficult time actually physically getting here because there is no good service to move them around the city. So there's a lot of different issues, and I'm hoping to bring this for council discussion at a committee of the whole meeting very soon. But this is a great starting point in terms of laying out all the different decisions that need to be made. So thanks so much for coming out, all the reps from Madison Metro, and thanks to the committee for letting this take up so much time so we can lay all this out.
Okay, and before we move on, I just want to reiterate thank you to Justin, Jennifer, and Mike for taking the time to come out and lay this information out for us. I do appreciate that. And Justin, or Andrew, did you have more on this item you were going to say?
I have a few more things, but Justin, Mike, Jennifer, if you guys want to head out, go for it. This will mainly just kind of involve Fitchburg decisions, so I definitely appreciate your time. If you want to stick around, that's fine too, but just want to give you a heads up. Can you, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, awesome. So I guess, and just to kind of quickly summarize these decisions, so we kind of ran through a couple of them, but I mainly want to focus on this decision one, whether or not to apply for direct operating assistance, and then potentially this decision four, procuring or kind of starting to think about a microtransit or some sort of shared ride complementary service to fixed route transit. And so with that, and by the way, this is what I believe Mike was referencing, this fish hatchery at Post. You can kind of compare, this is page 16 of the conclusions report. You can compare the accessibility between the existing network and the ridership and the existing network and the coverage. Sorry, I just saw this up. And so, feel free to check that out. I feel like that's useful data, and I think Mike said that we can get some of that summarized data as well. So.
And again, where is this?
What's that?
Where do we find this?
Oh, sure, yeah. So this is the website that Mike referenced. So
My Metro Bus?
Yeah, exactly, the transit network redesign. There's an
Yeah,
alternative
if
report.
if you type in mymetrobus.com/redesign, it'll take you here.
Yep.
Our website has URLs that are difficult, so we have a shortcut.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Metrobus.com/redesign.
So it's both alternatives, and then there's some more really interesting stuff in the conclusion. So, but with that, I think kind of the 2 points that I want to make is, last time I talked a little bit about this comparison. So this is basically the next few years with or without direct state funding. And so, kind of as I mentioned, so the total, sorry.
If you could blow that up just a couple more notches,
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is the budgeted contribution starting in 2022 and kind of continuing on, and saying that that's really the decision point. And so, basically, we kind of have these two options. This was the 620 figure that I was referencing. So this is kind of our current estimate, assuming business as usual, that we would stick with the way we're getting funding through or direct transit assistance through Metro. So basically, they take our overall cost, our partner share, and then reduce it by the operating assistance they get, and then kind of just pass on our net balance of starting next year, which would be something like $620,000. The other option would be that we would basically pay our full cost up front from Metro, and then we would submit that to WSDOT to receive reimbursements up to 55%. And so right now, I'm assuming 55%. It fluctuates between 53 and 55. But basically, under that scenario, starting next year, we would be paying roughly $50,000 less than that. And so that'll fluctuate every year, kind of depending upon how some of these assumptions are laid out. But Justin did a great job of kind of comparing these two. And so this just gives us kind of a flavor of, we're definitely saving some money in terms of operating assistance. And really the savings is coming out of just an increased percentage that WSDOT is willing to cover for Tier B, the smaller communities. And it kind of goes down the line. Tier C, the rural communities get even a larger percentage covered under their operating assistance. And I think it's just kind of an economies of scale kind of idea. And so, that's really where the savings would come from. I'll note that this decision, it's not without cost, and there certainly would be annual application cost. It would be some kind of reporting requirements, a kind of every year we would be audited, just in terms of compliance to make sure. But in terms of, it's all the same service. Metro's going to be collecting all the same service statistics that they do right now. We'll just be on the hook as being kind of the grantee for that state aid. So there will be some increased staff time cost, but we don't anticipate that will be compensated, or we'll still anticipate a net reduction in cost.
Okay, I gotta pause this second. We were looking at these numbers last time also, and I was totally baffled, and now I'm only 99% baffled.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is the right time for remedial instruction for my benefit, but I truly don't know what this is about.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to kind of bring this back and focus just on the net change. There's a lot of other numbers in here from, that I can basically take you through with the Excel, and you can kind of see behind the curtain and what the formulas are. But I guess the bottom line I'm trying to make here is that this is a comparison between getting direct state aid or getting it through Metro. And it's a win-win. Metro gets to keep that state aid that they're getting already, and then we get to get it out of a different state bucket and save some money because we're applying a higher percentage.
So I'm still not clear. We can fund, we're going to have an obligation for bus service in the order of $620,000. And we can get that money either from the State Department of Transportation or somehow from them through Metro. I don't know. I just don't know what those, and I also don't know if this, I mean, these are budgetary issues I'm not sure that this group needs to address, but I just have to tell you, I don't, and I apologize, and I know a smarter person might immediately grasp this better, but I do not understand this.
Yep. No, and that makes sense. I think I just want to kind of bring that up as this is another decision I think I might want to bring up in front of the committee as a whole, just to talk through. This is really the first decision, I would say, just from a timing perspective, just because we have to get on this pretty quickly. The nice thing is that I really like, aside from just the cost savings, is that this, if we ever do want to have a complimentary service, this would also cover 50% of that new service. And so currently we're kind of locked in that if it's any additional service, like for example, when we had the rideshare a couple of years back, we were paying for that full cost. We weren't getting any assistance from Metro from that because there was an external vendor. Whereas we could, as long as we applied for it in December before we would start incurring those costs, we could get that covered, roughly 53% of that. And so I kind of want to use that, and I guess the other thing I want to bring up, a similar vein, is this is an example of a few other Tier B jurisdictions.
Right, and Andrew, I can, if it helps at all. Justin had to get off, but we do partner also with Sun Prairie and Verona, who both are Tier B, and it helps actually all of the partners and Metro, because what happens is, just like with the state biennial budget here this last round, the legislature cut 50% of state funding to Tier A transit only, which affects Madison and Milwaukee, and that's it. Because we, give a percentage of that back to all the partners based on their percentage of their usage. That, in some retrospect, kind of hits you guys because we have less funding to get distributed out to you. Whereas Verona and Sun Prairie, we're not allocating some funds to them in that case because they get their own funding. They didn't have those cuts. And so honestly, that helps all of the partners in that aspect. There's a number of other things too. When we go and get grants, because we're Tier A, we might have an 80% payback on a bus grant, whereas Tier B is between 0 and 20% payback on a grant. So for being a larger entity, we get penalized to some degree where, for funding. So it's definitely something that we've worked with before. Like I said, we have partnerships with Sun Prairie and Verona who are on this list, and our Tier B transit agencies.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. That's definitely very helpful. So two of these are, as Jennifer mentioned, Sun Prairie and Verona. This is basically the data from WSDOT. So they both receive direct assistance from WSDOT versus going through Metro. And so you can see these were their basically estimates for operating expenses in 2021. Sun Prairie at 1.5 million, Verona at 1 million. They had their fare box revenue, which covered 20 or 15 to 20%. Their local investment, which covered 26 to 31%, and then you're seeing what WSDOT and kind of general federal funding covered at 55%. And so I guess and last year there was a little bit more increase, but let's say 53% is what we could hope for. So basically we're saying that whatever our operating expenses are for the year for services we get through Metro Transit or services we get through a shared ride company or microtransit, we can apply all of those operating expenses, additionally to some administrative cost, to WSDOT and receive 53% reimbursement for that. And it does help out Metro, it helps out the other partners, and it helps out us. So
I'm very much
Can
in
I-
favor of direct state funding option. I like it. If there are negatives, I haven't seen them yet, but to me, there's pretty much uniform positives.
Yep, and I think the only negatives I can see are some staff time. So just to apply every year and to do some statistics and kind of that auditing cost. But other than that, I mean, that's relatively minor in comparison to the benefits. So, and I mainly bring this up as these are, I think, great peers. Some of them, you know, like Sun Prairie has a commuter route as well as, sorry, it got cut off, but as well as shared ride taxi. And so, you know, I think that they're probably the most similar to us in terms of population, service area. They have roughly 8 shared ride taxis, and, you know, a somewhat similar budget, although they have, you know, one commuter route versus we have many kind of partial routes, and so that's a little bit different. But you know, I'm happy to talk about this more. Some of this data is more relevant to the 4th question of whether we should, you know, start scoping out how much a complimentary service would cost. But I'm happy to answer any questions about any of this data. So.
Just a comment. Thanks, Jennifer, for jumping in, because that was really helpful to know that this is actually, the direct state funding actually helps Metro and our partners, and it obviously can potentially be a significant budget savings for us, or money that we can ideally utilize to improve transit in the city, or reinvest in better transit. So that also, with this full context, I think it's kind of a no-brainer to do so, as long as it's okay with the staff time. And I guess I would be interested in investigating microtransit, but I guess my personal opinion is that we need to make sure that we are maintaining the level of service that we already have with Metro, and that the citizens that rely on it come to expect and rely on. And microtransit, if we do choose to do so, would be a complement to that in improving the access throughout the city and to the Metro network. But I think we should also potentially consider using that money to invest in getting the system to extend to our City Hall campus and maybe other parts of the city that could use that type of transit. There's also a little bit of intersecting issue that paratransit services are available through Madison Metro. Those only are available to people on fixed routes, and there are no fixed routes beyond Mckee Road. So even though there are lines that go up Lacey Road, they're not a fixed route, so paratransit service doesn't extend there, which is one of the reasons why seniors that live down Lacey Road couldn't get to the senior center using those types of services. So just another thing to consider.
Thank you. And so does that conclude item 7A, Andrew? Okay. Onward, agenda item 8A, resolution R9321. And I will ask before we get a motion to approve, if Andrew, you could just give us a synopsis of what this says.
Yep, you bet. So this project first appeared in 2018, the 2018 CIP. It went through a few changes in terms of what the project scope was, what some of the assumptions were in terms of how much the city was going to pay for versus the county versus the developer. So really this signal is in place. It's out at MM and Lacey now. And really we're just looking for kind of a revised cost share agreement to make up for some of the, basically a mistake that we thought that the Dane County was going to cover 50% of the total project costs, and they'll actually cover 50% of the net project cost after the developer pays. So that shrinks their share a little bit down to 34.9, and therefore raises our share. So we're just kind of revising that. We had some additional monies in some of the bonding we did for Mckee, so we shifted that over to basically make up for that shortfall. And so we're just getting a revision there, and then also asking for a amendment to the CIP to cover that revised cost share. So
Okay, before we go ahead, then I did have one question. What is the Mckee Road Phase 2 project, and can you say anything about what the implications of this change are for that?
Yeah, so from my understanding, that funding was basically, we had some estimates for what the Mckee Road project would cost last year. The actual, construction costs came in under that, so we have some additional bonding that we basically borrowed the money and we, didn't need to spend it on Mckee. So now we're basically just saying we'll use that bonding to instead pay for this.
Okay, that seems innocuous. With that, is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll move to approve Resolution R93-21.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Motion is made and second. Is there any discussion or comments on this? Gabriella?
Just wanted to, I mean, it's disappointing, this project. It's just disappointing that this mistake was made. I assume that this was just something because this project has been going on for so long and there was so much turnover in the department. Is that kind of the result of why this mistake was made? And is this something that we wanted to, will we avoid these types of mistakes in the future, given the fact that we're now fully staffed in Public Works?
Yeah, basically, yeah, and this kind of happened a little bit before I got here, but from my understanding that there was just a miscommunication between what the county was going to cover. And so I think, once everything shook out and we had all the, there was also kind of we go from estimates to actual cost. Now we have all the actual costs, so we feel a lot more comfortable with the agreement. But yeah, basically now we have a larger understanding of what they're going to cover, especially on some of these development related projects. So.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other comments on this resolution? Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving Resolution R93-21 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, this resolution is endorsed by the commission. Moving on, item 8B, and again, before we take a motion to approve this proposed rule, I think I'll ask Troy to give us a verbal rendition of what he's asking.
Yeah, this is to simplify our procedures. I have an addition as well. After the TTC members present, to add the sentence, any implied main motion will be to adopt. This is to simplify the matter. We have an awkward time. Should we have staff introduction? All our motions tend to be to adopt, so this just puts as a rule that we automatically proceed to each item. We assume that there's a main motion to adopt that's been done and seconded, that would be implied. And then we just proceed on to the discussion and then to the vote. So this just codifies what we actually do in practice. I think there's been if I can give a number, fewer than 1% of our actions where we've done something different than what I just described. So this just simplifies the process and makes it clear that we just proceed through the agenda, and when there's something to be decided, it's implied that it's a motion to adopt, and we proceed from there, just to avoid the hesitancy, especially when some people are doing remotely. There's a little bit, I've noticed a little bit lack of, what should we do? Well, we might as well just codify what we always do, which is move to adopt, seconded, and just make that part of the adoption of the agenda.
All right. Thanks for that summary, Troy. And just for clarity, you want to add some words to the language that's printed on this page?
Yeah.
Tell me what those are, or just verbally give those. Where does this go? Any implied motion?
Right after the present, after the first paragraph.
Oh, that's just an added.
Right.
So he's adding the words after the paragraph to say any implied main motion will be to adopt. All right, so we have that proposal for a procedural rule for us. Let's get see if there's, you had a question before we start?
Yeah, has this been vetted by the city attorney?
No,
Okay,
not as far as I know.
okay. It just seems like something that we should run by our city attorney.
Okay, let's see.
If it makes sense,
Excuse me. Let's get them, if there's a motion on the floor, we can have a discussion like this.
Oh, okay.
First, I'd like to know if is there, Troy, would you like to move adoption of this motion?
Sure. I move to adopt the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second so we can discuss, yeah.
Okay, there is a second, so we have this on the floor, and Gabriella, what was your discussion?
I just would want to run this by our city attorney, just so that we're making sure that we're following, our
I'd be
city
in
ordinances.
favor of tabling this motion until the next meeting.
Yeah, and we could just send it to Valerie
To
Zisman.
have discussion or input by the city attorney and the administrator. To make
Okay.
sure that there aren't any conflicts with anything. This is to make sure that our procedures are as simple and as straightforward as possible. Not that it has to be adopted today. This is not a priority item by any means. It's just I've just noticed hesitancy in different places, and this just says, okay, we're always going to move to adopt. There's always going to be a second. Let's just make that part of the stuff. There's several legislative bodies that I'm aware of, or semi-legislative bodies, which we are, they have a rules committee that sets this in as part of the rules of the day for each proceeding, which is basically the same as an agenda. And they're the person in charge of, the chair recognizes the person, like in the House of Representatives, it's the, there's a special rule that runs all the business. In the Senate, it's the majority leader. And this, the whole main motion, second, started is when you have an open meeting and no real agenda, and everybody's introducing motions as it comes out. And, our motions and agendas are pretty well set. So this just simplifies, standardizes the process.
Okay, so
Was
where we
my
are,
intent.
thank you, Troy. Where we are now is Gabrielle wants to get a legal opinion or opinion from the city administrator about this. Gabrielle, what is the best way for us to proceed to do that?
Well, can I say something?
Yeah, would you want to, Rich?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we even need to. For just an example, if Gabriella had not seconded your motion, it would have died. So I'm against having anything automatic. I'm for having something simplified. In my time with the city, I've served on multiple committees and commissions, and they're all a little different. And the ones that I find that work the best is when the chair goes to the agenda item, the staff gives their report on that item, and then there's a move. Somebody has to move to adopt and second. If there's no second, it's the end of the conversation. No more discussion. So I'm against, at first I was in favor of this because I like simplicity, but now I don't want to just throw away anything about the chance for something to fail because lack of a second or lack of anybody moving for it.
Okay.
Going back to, if we did want to give a chance for the legal to have a comment on it, we could, I'm happy to, well, whoever did the main motion, which is you, Troy, you could move to postpone.
Yeah.
Send the motion and then move to postpone to
Yeah,
the next
I-
meeting. And then if you want to send it to Valerie Zisman and Chad Brecklin and just say, I'm proposing this at our next meeting, can you take a look and see if this matches?
Well, I think the appropriate thing, if we table it, and then we can bring it back on the agenda
Yeah.
after the city attorney's had input.
I think best practice is actually to postpone it to a date certain so that it does come back.
Yeah.
But because tabling it typically means that it just is in perpetuity, kind of on the back
So I
burner.
take it that you're moving to postpone to the next meeting.
I actually believe that Troy has to rescind, he might have to rescind his motion and then we can move to postpone it. Because the motion on the table is to approve,
Right.
not to postpone.
Well,
So,
just because I don't want to open up this huge book of Robert rules to figure out what we're supposed to be doing, I'm perfectly happy to effectively do what you said, whatever the appropriate procedure is. Troy is willing to let this go until next time?
yeah, so Troy, if you want to rescind your motion and then
Yeah,
move to
and one
postpone.
My point is the reason we adopt the agenda is to make sure that items are there. And to me, the point I have is that if there's something that shouldn't be talked about, you know, or is not there, the time to do it is at, you know, when we set the agenda. Because that's why we adopt an agenda, is the way I look at it, is just to give a marching order to the chair saying, we're going to discuss this, this, and this. And to me, if there's a problem with an item, that'd be the point, because you know, if it's not unanimous, then, you know, we can remove it from the agenda at that point. But to me, if it goes on the agenda, then we can just,
Okay,
you know, go through the agenda without
right.
having to do the other stuff as well.
Troy, we don't need to.
So I'm going to withdraw the motion.
Okay, the motion is withdrawn by the author, so it's no longer on the table.
And then do we need a motion to refer to the,
Well, I can go ahead. I'll move to postpone this discussion to the October Transportation and Transit Committee meeting.
I second that.
And can you tell me how this is going, who and how this will be brought to the attention of the attorney or whoever else is?
I see either you or Troy or Andrew, I guess, email Valerie and Chad with the language and just say you want a legal review of it prior to our.
Andrew,
October
could you do that for us? I see you nodding. I would appreciate that. And then if you could then excuse me, Troy, if you could then put it on the agenda for next time with the comment with a summary of what you learned from the attorney, and then we can take it up at that time. So we've postponed this, and if anything I just said is in violation of Robert's Rules of Order, I apologize, but I think we've decided to put this off till next time, get an attorney's opinion through the good graces of Andrew, who will get that for us.
I think we do need to take a vote, though, on the postponement.
All right, all those in
Yeah.
favor of postponing?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Say nay. Thank you very much. All right, that concludes, announcements. Do you have some announcements, Andrew? Other announcements? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. I guess I should have.